Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Inside Game podcast. Before I introduce today's guest, this episode is in association with Raymond Waters at the Old Coach Inn Castleblaney. And here's a word from Ray's Tanning and Wellness in Auchnachoy.
Rays are the first on the island of Ireland to offer the Red Wave Pure Red Light Therapy Bed, a cutting-edge recovery tool now being used by top athletes worldwide. Whether it's muscle soreness, inflammation, joint stiffness or speeding up overall recovery, red light therapy is becoming a genuine game changer. So if you're training hard, coming back from a knock or just wanting to stay injury free, call into Rays and experience the benefits for yourself. Rays Tanning and Wellness, helping athletes recover faster, perform better and stay in the game.
Welcome everyone to the Inside Game podcast. Please remember folks to give the Inside Game a like, a follow or subscribe on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok and YouTube. It really does help keep the podcast coming. So episode number 16 today, and if you're in the world of GAA podcasts or on online videos at all, it's very unlikely that you haven't seen this man popping up on your YouTube feed. But if you're still not sure, this is Aaron Prendergast. He's the host of the Gaelic Games Fan TV platform on YouTube and other social media outlets. So Aaron, you're very welcome onto the show. How's it going?
Yeah, cheers very much, Gary, for having me on. Yeah, keeping well now. Cheers for having me on. Looking forward to the weekend's games. Some big games, and obviously, yeah, yourself being an Armagh man, myself being a Dublin man. There's there's obviously a lot to discuss there. There's obviously a lot on the line on Saturday or on Sunday or Saturday. Yeah, geez, I'm mixing up the days now. But yeah, Saturday it should be a very interesting game. Obviously, with Dublin potentially going down, Armagh maybe going down as well. So yeah, no, cheers very much for having me on.
No, not a problem. Like I've mentioned your platform there already, Gaelic Games Fan TV, very popular indeed. The sort of subscriber and follower numbers someone like myself could only dream of at this stage. Over 6,000 subscribers on YouTube, 12,000 followers on Instagram, and almost 14,000 followers on TikTok. So, like, that's a nice gig you've got going, Aaron. Why don't you maybe speak a bit towards that, and when did it start up? What got you into it? Things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Cheers for the comments there and everything else. I do appreciate it. I suppose I got started really mainly. I remember I was doing a lot of traveling. Around 2016, 2017, 2018, I did a J1 in Canada, J1 in America, and I remember trying to keep up to date with Gaelic games, and there was nothing back then. There was no podcasts or anything really. I think Colin Parkinson might have been knocking around, but I hadn't discovered him at that stage, so there was nothing really kind of. Yeah, it was kind of just, you had GEA Go back then, and that was kind of it, and that was it really. So I always kind of thought like a GEA YouTube channel would be a really good idea. There was a lot of other sports channels knocking about, like with soccer and everything else, especially when I was living in Canada, where, the sports we'd follow over here was kind of next to nothing over there. You wouldn't really see much information about it. So I found YouTube to be a good source of that. So, I always wanted to get into media, always wanted to kind of have my own platform, my own channel. And when I got back from my J1 in 2017, it was a long time ago now, but I just, after the Mayo game, I just decided, I'm just going to make a video on it, the All-Ireland final. It did quite well, surprisingly, even though the quality was absolutely horrendous. I literally recorded it on an old Samsung phone with no microphone. There was no visuals at all. I put it together on like Movie Maker. I kind of just went from there. Like it probably wasn't until like 2020, 2021 when I really kind of started being consistent with it. Like around 2018 and 2019, I uploaded a few videos here and there, but I wasn't really consistent with it. I just really enjoyed it. Enjoyed chatting to people, speaking to people, other fans, getting other perspectives. I know more than yourself, obviously a massive GA fan, and I've really enjoyed it so far. It's been a great experience. Thankfully enough, as you said, there's been a decent following that's going to come along the way, and hopefully we can keep it going, and same for yourself as well.
Yep. So look, being an Armagh man myself, a few videos on your channel certainly caught my eye over the years. You had a match day vlog of the 2024 All-Ireland final where you watched it from Hill 16. There was another one where you dedicated a full piece to, in your words, the great Armagh team of 2002. But the one that stood out to me and to a lot of other Armagh fans was your video you released on 20th of October 2022, and it was called "Why Armagh Can Win the All Ireland," with the tagline of "Armagh are dangerous." Now, I watched it quite recently actually, and there was one point in particular where you spoke of how Armagh's indiscipline was playing a part in holding them back. And lo and behold, in 2024 season, there wasn't a single black card, there wasn't a single red card, no getting involved in skirmishes that season either. So, look, a brilliant video, Aaron, and it aged really well.
Yeah, it did. Now, if you do go back and watch my All-Ireland predictions in 2024 and some other videos, I had started to actually lose a bit of faith in Armagh, to be honest, when they lost the Ulster final. So maybe I was probably a year early in making that video a little bit, but yeah, no, I remember seeing Armagh versus Galway kind of close up in that game. I remember being at the game versus Monaghan as well, and I always felt there was potential within the team. They were only losing games narrowly on penalty shootouts. It just felt like they needed maybe an extra couple of percent, and then they would be there. And there was also signs as well that Dublin were slowing down. There was signs that maybe Kerry, although maybe now are probably coming to their prime, but a couple of years after 2022. When they won it didn't feel, or 2021, it didn't feel like they were kind of at their best. It felt like there were maybe just a few, just slightly kind of off, and I felt like there was a chance for Armagh, Tyrone, a few other teams maybe to go and win it. And then I suppose they did in the end. It was probably an unusual way that he did win it, with not winning Ulster, but it was fully well deserved. And being there in Croke Park, like it was. Yeah, I was very lucky to kind of get a ticket last minute, and it was very unusual kind of being there on the hill for the All-Ireland final day when it's not obviously your own county, but there was a huge amount of Armagh fans around me, so I kind of just found myself supporting Armagh really, even though I'd no dog in the race, to be honest with you, but I just wanted to. I didn't want them to think I was a Galway man or something like that, that way. So kind of just went along with it, and like it was the atmosphere and everything else, like it was. It was up there with any of the best atmospheres I think I've ever experienced.
Yeah. Can we talk about the great Dublin team of the 2010s era and a little bit beyond? That Dublin had won 5 consecutive Leinster titles between 2005 and 2009. No All-Ireland came with that. And under normal circumstances, most counties' window of opportunity would probably disappear at that point, and that's possibly how people were starting to see it whenever Meath put 5 goals past Dublin in 2010, and they went on to take the Leinster title for themselves. But it turns out that Dublin team, they were only getting started, really. They would follow on with 14 more consecutive Leinster titles, but more importantly, All-Ireland success then would follow. And boy, did it follow. 2011, 2013, and then the most dominant spell ever seen probably by any county team, not just getting the first team to get 5 in a row, but they went one better, they got 6. Another title in 2023 thrown in for good measure. So look, just an incredible era for one county to go through. And as a Dublin fan yourself, maybe just talk us through those days a wee bit, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. It was it was kind of looking back at it, we probably didn't realize how good we actually had it. Now when you kind of look at how things have changed, and I suppose the rest of the country were talking about splitting us in 2 and 3, and it was almost like the whole country just expected that this was going to go on forever. We were always just going to win Leinster, win the All-Ireland or win a couple of All-Irelands and everything else. But I remember being there in 2011 when they won the All-Ireland. It was 15 at the time, and it was an incredible day for that All-Ireland final. I remember the build up to it. I remember being there in 2009 as well when we got hammered by Kerry, 2008 by Tyrone. I wasn't at the Meath game, maybe thankfully in 2010, but I was at the Cork All-Ireland semi-final defeat. It just felt like during that period, Dublin were probably very flashy in some ways. They kind of played to the crowd. It was very we'll just outscore you, we'll outshoot you, we'll just beat you, playing this ultra-attacking football. But the problem was there was always a few teams better than us at that stage, the likes of Kerry, the likes of Tyrone. And I think confidence as well, once we would go a couple of points down in the game, we could be on the receiving end of a hiding. And I felt like Pat Kilroy just kind of solidified the defence. I remember he changed a couple of things. And It kind of just snowballed from there. Like, we were quite lucky. We had a couple of underage teams. We had the underage under 20 team, I think, that won the under 20 All Ireland in 2012, I think it was. We had a great minor team that was coming through, and we had a couple of under 20 teams, like the likes of Kieran Kilkenny and Paul Mannion all came through from one team. Brian Fenton was a mad one as well, because I don't even think he played under 20 football. So where we got him from, I'm not entirely sure. And then Con kind of came along as well at the back end of it in like 2016, 2017. Cormac Costello as well. So we just had this like conveyor belt of players that just kept coming and coming and coming, and it felt like it was never going to stop. Unfortunately, it probably has over the last couple of years, but at the same time, that is only normal, because it can't, and what other era or sport would it go on forever? And yeah, it's been incredible. It's mad. Like, I remember we won the All Ireland in 2020, and it was during COVID. I remember watching it with a few friends, and it was the most weirdest feeling ever. It was like, we've won the All Ireland, nice one, but you nearly forgot about it 20 minutes later. Whereas now it's like, I remember in 2023, you were nearly out for the whole weekend after they won it. So, and I don't know what I'd do if we won it this year, which probably won't happen. But yeah, it's kind of mad looking back at it, to be fair.
Yeah, incredible times, I'm sure. If I go to more current matters, Aaron, maybe ask you about Dublin in the league so far. Dublin had a big win over Roscommon the last day out, both in terms of the scoreline and in terms of the significance towards avoiding relegation. 121-27, the final score. That was without Conor Callaghan and without Cormac Costello, I should add. And then more generally, 2 wins and 3 losses. So what have you made of the Dubs so far?
Yeah, it's been interesting. Like, if you had asked me before the Roscommon game, I might have been a little bit more negative. Whereas I think the Roscommon game has definitely given Dublin fans across the county definitely a major boost, and definitely it's nice to win a game and also win a game playing brilliant football, which we haven't really seen too often. Like, even in the back end of Desi Farrell, when we were winning games, a lot of the time it wasn't particularly brilliant. So I remember being at the Cork game last season, the preliminary qualifiers, and it was desperate at times, really. So I think seeing us play great football, seeing us play good football, I think first of all is good to see. And yeah, I felt like in the Roscommon game, like it's kind of been a tale of two stories, really. There's a Roscommon game and there's everything else before it. Everything else before it was quite poor and lethargic and not really playing to the standard we would have expected under Ger Brennan. But in the Roscommon game, it all came together. Like, I mean, I think we've scored 11 2-pointers in the entirety of the league so far, and I think 5 of them came in the opening half an hour of that game. So that just shows you how much something clicked within the team. And yeah, Noel Scully, back to his best. Kieran Kilkenny looking back to his best. We've introduced a few new young lads as well, like Charlie McMorrow and Owen Kennedy as well, who I think have both been impressive. Joe Quigley as well. So yeah, it's definitely a building block. So I think a lot of Dublin fans are very patient as well. Even if we had lost the Roscommon game, we just kind of have to get behind Ger Brennan now, and we have to get behind these new group of players. And I don't think there's any point, throwing up a fuss around like that. To be fair, it's not really the kind of Gaelic football or Gaelic games kind of way to do that. So yeah, I think everyone's behind Ger Brennan, really. And I think the big aim this season really is if we can stay up brilliant. But I think the Leinster Championship definitely has to be the serious target.
Just a shout out and a thank you to Raymond Waters at the Old Coach Inn, Castleblaney, for the continued support of the podcast. If you're ever in Castleblaney, or even if you're not, why not visit the Old Coach Inn for a fine dining experience and entertainment in their friendly bar and lounge. That's in the Old Coach Inn, Castleblaney. If
I just talk a little bit about Armagh and current circumstances, Armagh's story's a little bit different, I suppose, so far. A big win over Monaghan on day 1, followed by 4 defeats. But the defeats were by 1 point a couple of times and the others by 3 and 4 points, which means the scoring difference remarkably hasn't went into the negative. Armagh are the only team in the bottom 5 to have a positive scoring difference, so it kind of tells a tale on its own. Last day out against Mayo, again playing against a strong wind in the first half. Armagh trailed by 9 points at half time and by 10 points partway through the second half. But there was a good purple patch with a few 2-pointers hit, and the lead clawed back quite well, with still a fair decent amount of time remaining. But Mayo introduced Kobe McDonald and he would be heavily involved in a Mayo goal and get a couple of points of his own, all of which sort of eventually meant Mayo would win out by a single point. But more generally, though, for Armagh, look, it's been a difficult few weeks, of course, for fans and for the team. Certainly positive signs, and an increasing list of pundits seem fairly upbeat on Armagh's credentials. The most recent this season today was Kevin Cassidy, who said they're playing some super football and just falling short. Honestly, he thinks they're like 99% there. Looking at their play as a whole, he thinks McGeeney will be fairly happy. I see closely from within Armagh, and the plenty of people are considerably more critical than that, and they don't see at all what these pundits are talking about. Like, what's your take on Armagh so far, Aaron?
Yeah, look, I'd probably be more in agreement with that as well, to be honest. I don't think it's been, I have seen some of the criticism as well. Like, and I think maybe sometimes when teams lose a couple of games and everything else, we can we can judge things by results only. But as we know, it's a long season, and there is obviously the All-Ireland series, the Ulster Championship, and everything else. So I think at this stage, it's more so I'd rather have the performances rather than bad results. And I think Armagh have definitely still had some good performances in there. I think they've been a bit unlucky at times, to be honest, from what I've seen. Like a lot of those goal chances on other days, it's very rare to see a team of Armagh's quality go 4 games in a row without a goal. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's quite rare in itself. There's a penalty miss in there. There's other chances, and a lot of the defeats as well. Like I think Roscommon probably caught you on the hop a little bit maybe that day. Maybe weren't expecting Roscommon to probably be as good as they were, and then there's too much damage. Like Donegal have been outstanding throughout the league this season, and even towards the end, they actually, despite missing, like the amount of wides you had in that game as well was mad. Yet you actually nearly got something from that with the penalty at the end.
Mm-hmm.
And then like the Mayo game as well. Like obviously watching the highlights of that game, like a 1 point defeat away to Mayo, I don't think is the worst result in the world. Like I think when you look at Mayo's form, like they wiped the floor with us, and they probably could have beat us by more. So yeah, like I think Armagh have been pretty decent. They've been missing players as well, like Rory Grugan and everything else. We'll see if Rian O'Neill comes back maybe later in the year. You've Andrew Murnan as well. So there definitely has been a couple of injuries within there from an Armagh perspective. So I think it's one of them when you will see Armagh probably click. I'm hoping it won't be Saturday, but they probably will click at some point. And I think they will go on a bit of a run after that.
Yeah, there seems to be a feeling that Armagh are slightly, they're not ruthless enough, or they're not taking their scores. But I actually see it slightly different in that if there was a couple of stalwarts in defence who are missing, the likes of Barry McCambridge and Aaron McKay, that the scoring, the forwards have actually scored enough, and that all they would really need is just a couple more good stopping defenders to stop, maybe 4 or 5 points in a game, which both of those combined would be quite capable of doing.
Yeah, no, it is an interesting opinion. Yeah, like it probably is as well. Like, because when you think about it, when you're racking up, 22, 23 points a game, that more often than not is enough to win you a game. And that's why I think, if 1 or 2 of those goals go in over the last kind of couple of matches, you probably have 6 points on the board, and then it's a completely different conversation around Armagh. But yeah, definitely maybe defensively as well, like in particular the Galway game. And like there was a lot of kind of silly goals that were probably given away in that game, in fairness. So yeah, like there's some key players missing from Armagh, and if you do get them back, then it's definitely between yourselves and Donegal still, in my opinion, for the Ulster Championship.
Yeah, I'd say a view held by a lot of people. Look, Dublin and Armagh in recent times, the side have faced each other 3 times across the league and championship. 2022 in Croke Park, Armagh beat Dublin in the first round of the league, scoreline of 113 to 215, and then in 2025 the sides would meet twice, once in the league, once in the championship, Armagh winning on both occasions by 8 points and 5 points respectively. So certainly recent history, Aaron, if it is any burn, is in Armagh's favour coming into this one.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. Both games. I remember the one in 2022. That was kind of almost like the start of Dublin's downfall, maybe in some ways. I know we won the All Ireland the year later, but we were relegated during that season. And last season was a strange one. Dublin in the league, where we're probably actually very lucky to survive. I think some of our performances in the league last season have arguably actually been worse this season. And Armagh, I remember, was one of them where it was a game where it was over really, after about 15, 20 minutes. Like it wasn't a contest at all. And even in the championship as well, like I remember being at that game and I didn't even think Armagh were at their best. And they won the game comfortably and it wasn't a big fuss. And I remember a full time, the players shaking hands, where a lot of other teams beating Dublin in the past would be jumping around and going crazy. Whereas I just felt like it was business as usual, really, for Armagh, and I felt like that was maybe a reflection of the teams. I remember Dublin had a huge amount of wides as well in the game in the group stages, like the amount of chances we missed. Really, really poor shooting on the day, and yeah, I think Armagh at this moment in time look like a more physical team. They're a much stronger team. They're a lot more fierce in terms of tackling. Great ball carriers, and I think Dublin have just lost a lot of those players. I think in recent seasons, in terms of Mick Fitz and Brian Fenton and James McCarthy. We don't have a lot of power or strength around our team at the moment. Something that Brennan, I think, is trying to fix by, we've used a lot of players in the league, but I think Armagh physically, I think, are a lot bigger and stronger than the Dubs. At least in recent times, we'll see how they match up on Saturday, but certainly in recent seasons, I think Armagh have had the better in regards to that. Yeah.
And are you aware at the time of recording, Aaron, of any injury updates or anything you got? The likes of Con O'Callaghan and Costello, who I mentioned earlier?
Nothing at the moment. No, it's a closed shop in Dublin, to be honest with you. You wouldn't really find that now. I think with Con, it's one of them where we'd heard he'd be back for the Roscommon game, and then he wasn't. But he was there for the game before, for the opening half. So it's kind of hard to know really with Con. I would hope he would be back for this game. I don't think Costello will be. And I did hear Paddy Andrews on the football pod there say he doesn't think Con Basquel will be back at all this season. So it looks like he's potentially going to be gone. It is interesting. We're missing a lot of key players, but at least at the same time, we are being able to give time to other players like Luke Brecknock as well, and a few other forwards, Joe Quigley. So there is still kind of a good group of players there, but I think to beat Armagh, I think we'd need at least one of Con and Cormac, if not both.
Well, if Kieran McGeeney's word's anything to go by, and it usually is, Armagh shouldn't have really anyone back from injury. That going by the Mayo game a couple of weeks ago, there shouldn't really be anyone new to come back there. Having said that, some of the guys maybe have injuries like things to their hand where they're still able to keep themselves fit and sharp. So maybe if their hand injury was to clear up, you may see them on the bench or something like that. But so far, it looks like it's Armagh still going to go with what they've been going with over the last few games. So the team is probably going to be a lot very similar to what we've already seen. But look, before I get a prediction from you here, Aaron, I want to ask you about Leinster football. We spoke earlier about how dominant Dublin were in Leinster for essentially 20 years, and they were clearly brilliant, as the All Ireland record would show. But it was also part down to the drop off in other counties. Meath and Kildare probably most notably. And Louth obviously picked up their first ever Leinster title last year. They also reached an under-20 All Ireland final last year. And I see there today that Louth forward Kieran Downey, he believes the county now have things in order, finally have things in order, and I wouldn't rule out an All-Ireland in the next 5 or 6 years. And then if you add that to Meath making strides last year, they beat Dublin, they beat Kerry, they beat Galway, all in the championship, on their way to reaching an All-Ireland semi-final, and they're currently pushing hard to get promoted to Division 1, as are Louth actually as well. So look, Leinster football, it seems to be moving into a more healthy position again.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. Like it's would have been very interesting to see Louth and Meath as they are now, maybe when Dublin were in their prime. Like, don't get me wrong, I think Dublin still would have had enough and probably still win all those Leinster championships, but it certainly would have made it a lot more competitive. And I think it is interesting that Dublin's drop is coincidentally the same time Louth and Meath rise up. Like, whether those two things are connected, I'm not entirely sure, but probably did have a bit of a part to play when one team is so dominant that maybe players of certain counties don't want to play for their county, or the standards drop and everything else. So probably is somewhat connected. But yeah, look, obviously as a Dublin fan, it was very strange being in Portlaoise last year when we lost to Meath. It was a very unusual feeling, and it wasn't even like disappointment or anything, because how can you be disappointed when you've won a competition? 14 times in a row. It was more just surprise and kind of like, wow, that's actually happened. But fair play. Look, I've been silently big admirers of Meath in terms of how they've played football. They're very entertaining. They're very good to watch. Anytime I've watched their games, they've been very good. They've definitely benefited hugely from the new rules. And Robbie Brennan, to be fair, like I was saying it before, when there was talks about Desi leaving, I was even saying, although Robbie Brennan was a Meath man, he was managing in Kilmacud Crokes, and I was even saying, would there be any chance of him coming to Dublin? Maybe he would have been an interesting, an interesting appointment, because I think he's a quality coach, and he's proven that so far. And then, as you said, with Louth, like they're coming strong. You've got, Kildare, who are kind of slowly improving. Wexford looking good in Division 3. So, it's definitely good overall. Obviously, as a Dublin fan, I want to see my team win. But at the same time, as a neutral fan, I think it's better for Leinster football. And ultimately, to be honest, the amount of Leinster finals I've gone to and probably don't even remember, like you want the games to be memorable. You want the games to be spoken about. Like I remember the 2005 Leinster final. I remember the 2009 one. If you were to ask me now, the 2016 Leinster final, probably wouldn't even be able to tell you who played. And that's the reality of it. And being in Croke Park as well, actually, I was at the Meath and Louth game. And it was, it was like being at an All-Ireland final in many ways,
Mm-hmm. Excellent. So look, I mentioned about getting a prediction from you. So let's, but look, both teams have all to play for here. Certainly nobody's pulling up any handbrakes to avoid league finals or anything like that. It's quite the opposite, trying to stay in the division. Both teams need the points. So who do you think is going to come out on top, if anyone?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be against a draw, to be fair, because that would put us in a decent position. But I probably will go for Armagh, to be honest, which maybe might be a little bit surprising as a Dublin man. But I think if I'm being unbiased and everything else, I think I would have to say that I still think Armagh probably have a little bit more than this Dublin team. I know, as we were saying, the form of Armagh losing 4 games, but as we said, they haven't been maybe as poor as people have been making out to be, or maybe as the results suggest. For Dublin, it's one big win against Roscommon, but it is one game in a flurry of games where the performances haven't been there. And I do think with Dublin, there will be a lot of changes. There'll be a lot of inconsistencies. I think this year, in many ways, it's just going to be very up and down for Dublin. We're going to have some great wins, some good moments, but I think equally we're going to have some off days as well. But I think it'll be close. Look, I only think there'll be a couple of points in it, and I think it will have the makings of a championship game in many ways, because I think both teams will be going back and forth. I think the big thing for Dublin is the midfield. That's kind of the area I worry, because I could see someone like a Callum O'Neill or Ben Creeley or whoever's in there. I think Andrew Murnan's injured. Like that. That's an area where you could probably dominate, to be honest. That's an area where we might struggle. I'll probably go with Armagh ever so slightly, but look, it is a prediction. I'll obviously be hoping I'm wrong, and no doubt I'll have the blue jersey on the hill and everything else. So
yeah, of course. I'll probably tip my hat towards Armagh as well here. I think just because Dublin have the 2 points over us, we desperately need them. Now, Dublin, don't get me wrong, Dublin want the points, feel like they'll need the points, but I think our need maybe just that bit more. And something I just can't wrap my head around is losing 5 games in a row, because it's just not something that this Armagh team in this current era is it's just not something they've done very often. They've been very, very consistent. This is probably one of the most inconsistent spells in terms of results that there's been in quite a few years now. And they've usually been able to back up maybe a bad performance or a bad result in the last few years with a good turnaround, So I can't really wrap my head around winning or losing 5 games in a row. So on kind of on that basis, I'm going to tip my hat towards Armagh. But look, Aaron, we'll wrap it up with that. Look, I really appreciate you coming on to the show, and I love speaking to someone who has sort of walked the path that I'm trying to walk myself for a good few years now, in this podcast and social media arena. So look, good insights as fully expected, and a real pleasure, Aaron. Thanks very much for coming on.
Yeah, absolutely, no bother at all, Gary. Yeah, cheers for having me on, and best of luck with the show. And if you need me again, just give me a shout. Yeah,
sure will. Thanks, Aaron.